exactly 1 week after I was baptized, the young adults, and they were getting ready to go on this annual pilgrimage to the birthplace of the church, Palmyra, New York. And they had a big, what they called it, the Hill Cumorah pageant every summer. And it was a big theatrical, musical, outdoor extravaganza. And that sort of reenacted the beginning of the church and the history of the Book of Mormon. And it's really a cool thing. And they were going, and they said, hey, you should come with us. And so I did. And I wasn't really prepared. Jumping right into with a group of young adults where nobody was in charge of making sure that I was having the right experience. And probably most of them had been members most of their life. And off we drove to upstate New York. So I don't know, but I was not ready for it. One of the things that happened that weekend was that it was Fast Sunday. Saturday afternoon, they said, okay, we're fasting. And I'm like, fasting? What do you mean? And I said, well, it's Fast Sunday, so tomorrow, and we're going to need to, we need to fast for 24 hours. And I go, what? We're camping. It was hot, and we were camping, and I hadn't prepared, and all of a sudden I wasn't allowed to eat for 24 hours. And that, I was cranky out, let's just say that. I was not a happy camper. Second of all, the pageant. I hadn't read the Book of Mormon. I knew just the very basics of the story. And so, really, I didn't get it. I didn't get, it was obvious, it was well done, and it was, a great show, but I didn't know the story. And so I was like, over my head, and I didn't have a great experience that way. And yet I could see that everybody around me was deeply moved by it. And I was like, huh? And nobody was, like giving me a guided tour of anything. I just would look at stuff and read things and say, what's that? I don't get it. It was just confusing. And on Sunday, we had a little church service, just us. We had a little testimony meeting. Pretty much everybody bore their testimony, and one by one they'd stand up and just say what was on their mind. But to me, it sounded like everyone said the exact same thing, and they said it with the same tone of voice, and they used the same words, and I was like, what is this? Don't these people have a mind of their own? Did it just sound like a recording or something? And I know that bothered me. And so all in all, I kind of had not a really great experience with this whole thing. And then when I came home that week, in our house we had 2 sets of encyclopedia. Encyclopedia Britannica and World Book Encyclopedia. And before the internet, the encyclopedia was the fount of all knowledge. And if it was in the encyclopedia, it was fact. Anytime I had to write a report, anytime I wanted to know about anything, I went to the encyclopedia. And so I looked up the church in both of them, and the way they portrayed it, they'd say things like, the alleged prophet claimed and purports that, and I was like, the language that they used was not very complimentary, and that really, really bothered me. We almost worshipped at the feet of the encyclopedia, and it was not painting a very good picture of the church, and that bothered me a great deal. I think I had some conversations with friends who, instead of being happy for me, knowing that I'd been searching and searching and searching, and I finally found the church I wanted, they were concerned. That bothered me. So, I was starting to have some second thoughts. And I got through that week, and that weekend was another big event. This was a youth event. It was the biggest event of the year, youth conference. And at that time in Ohio, kids from all over the state got together for youth conference on a college campus somewhere, and everybody came from all over. And I didn't know what it was. I heard the kids talking about it and getting all excited about it and stuff, but I didn't know what it was, and I had no feelings about it one way or the other. And like Sister Richard said, well, I'm picking you up at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning to go to youth conference. And I was like, okay. I'm like, oh, really, really having some issues. I don't know, just feeling insecure about the whole thing. And as it happened that week, a family had moved into town, an LDS family, and maybe 2 days before. And the oldest daughter was 15 and old enough to go to youth conference. And so we were picking her up too. And we did, and she was going to be going to my high school, and she didn't know anybody at all, and I didn't have any, friends yet. And so Michelle and I decided we would be roommates, and we got to the college, and we we were late registering, and they had to scramble to find us a room. And anyway, we got situated. We decided to go over to the field house where they play basketball, and there was a rehearsal of some sort going on. And I thought, I'm an actress, and I'm used to rehearsals, and I'm in the choir and the band, and rehearsal is a word that I'm very familiar with and comfortable with. And so we went over to this. It was a dance festival rehearsal. Sat up in the bleachers and looked down on these kids preparing for the dance festival. And what a dance festival is groups from all these local groups would practice their part of it before they showed up, for weeks, months before. And then when they got together, they would each take turns doing their thing. And then there was some part of it that they all did together, and they had to rehearse all that. And as I sat and I watched these kids, like I said, this was familiar territory for me. Performing, it's my thing. And what I saw was these kids that just were so enthusiastic. They had clearly prepared well. They were cheerful and happy and excited. They were cooperative and polite and thoughtful and all these virtues, really. And they just shone. They were just glowing with their enthusiasm and their goodness. And the whole thing was run not by adults, it was run by the kids themselves. And the leadership that I was witnessing just blew my mind. And I kept thinking, oh my gosh, I can't even, in my wildest imagination, can I picture my peers at school doing this kind of thing. Okay, yeah, I knew that there were some kids in my high school that square danced, but the popular kids didn't do that kind of thing. And you just couldn't have gotten people to do this. They just wouldn't have, or they would have had a real attitude about it. And it was wholesome. It was well done. It was clever, and just in every way I could think of, I was impressed. I was very impressed. And it made me start really paying attention, and I was watching very carefully everything that happened that weekend. And what I saw was young people who exemplified Christ. This is what I've been looking for. This is what I was searching for in other churches. I wanted to see it made a difference for good in the lives of the people. I wanted to see Christ showing through in the way they acted, and the way they talked, and the way their attitudes. and the way they treated each other. And I did. I thought, this is what I want. This is what I've been looking for. This is what I want to be. If this is the way this church shows up in the lives of its people, then this is my church. This is what I want. And there was a youth committee of leadership, whatever committee, that was running the whole thing, had planned the whole thing and was running it. And it was a fabulous conference, and I was just so impressed. I just ached because I thought, I'm 16, I'm almost 17. These kids have been doing this since they were babies. They were raised this way from birth. And they've learned all this stuff. Like, we had these classes. The classes, to me, the information that we were getting in these classes was like, I've never heard anything like this before. And yet the kids, I'd look around at their faces and they all knew this stuff. This was not earth-shattering to them, but to me it was like, oh my gosh, and I realized I have so much to learn. I have so much catching up to do. And I remember distinctly feeling like I was at the bottom of a mountain and everybody else was up at the top. And how was I ever going to get up there? How was I ever going to catch up? And before we went to bed, our leaders wanted us to all have prayer together. So we went into one of the dorm rooms, and I guess we had sang a song and said a prayer, and then they said, so does anyone want to bear their testimony? The girls from my ward were getting ready. They had been planning this for a long time. They had planned all these pranks they were going to do. And they had brought all of their supplies, their toilet paper and shaving cream and whatever. And they were chomping at the bit to get out of that room. And the last thing that on their minds was bearing their testimony. And nobody was saying anything. And I was just, so overwhelmed by everything that had been happening. And so I said, well, I have something to say. And so I kind of told my story, especially how I'd been looking for a church for a long time and how I finally found it and I was baptized, but then last week I kind of got disillusioned by my experience going to the pageant and things I'd read in the encyclopedia and stuff, and then I was really wondering if I'd made a big mistake before I came to youth conference, and then what I had encountered when I was there, and how I didn't know how I could ever catch up with it. This is when I knew that I was so impressed with the way everyone was behaving and how nice everyone was and what leadership skills they exhibited, and I just felt overwhelmed. How could I ever catch up? And as it turned out, after I bore my testimony, somebody else did, and then somebody else, and then somebody else, and it turned out to be a really sweet time. And the girls who were planning their big pranks decided not to do it. I can say, looking back now, knowing how I was feeling before I showed up at youth conference, if I hadn't gone to the field house, if I hadn't watched those kids practicing and been so impressed, I might have just been all in my head, feeling I don't fit in, I don't know anybody, I'm not happy, and then the girls would have played their pranks and I would have gone, oh my gosh, I don't want to have anything to do with these people. And you've listened to the previous experiences I had and know that that can happen. I had that experience with the Episcopal Church, and it very easily could have happened again. But it didn't. And somebody was watching out for me.